All right, I welcome everybody. I don't hear any coffee machines, so I think we're going to get started. Now's the time. Welcome to the January iteration of the Finger Lakes Art Series reading, and we have upcoming events on this little schedule on all the tables in case anyone's curious for the next few months to tell you who's reading. I don't know who's showing art the next few months. That's my wife's department, but if you're curious, you can ask her. Okay, there's a drink coming. You want me to vamp?
Does anybody want to help me vamp?
Okay, we'll get started. I can talk to you about Milo. This is Milo Fredrickson, everyone, our feature for the evening. Round of applause for Milo's show. Round of applause. I saw Milo read here like a year ago, like a full year ago, and I was incredibly impressed and thought you really should feature here. And and especially because I think I have a very soft spot for supporting young writers. I teach a lot of young writers, and so I saw someone I thought, wow, that's a talented writer. Let's get her in here. And here she is. She came back after a year. So straight from Italy Valley, where it is snowing badly and the roads are terrible.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So if you're going that way, be careful, please, everybody. I don't know what to say, Milo. You're indeed a very young writer. You're what I would call like a college age writer, and you write primarily fiction, but also poetry.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've started to focus on it within this year.
And I know that he's putting together a collection, Milo is, of poems, and so if you, I don't know, it's good. I'll just say if you're curious after this reading, definitely talk to Milo. And I know some people have connections to publishers and such. And it's a small world, this publishing world and this writing world. So it's great that we have Milo here, and I hope everybody's going to sign up for the open mic, and we have a nice convivial evening. And thank you all for coming. The weather is, it is what it is. It's January in Western New York. Well, welcome everyone. Milo Fredrickson.
Thank you. Is this, I don't know if this is properly adjusted. Should I?
You can do whatever you like, but I can adjust it for you if you want it. I generally advise people to keep it lower than you think you need it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's below you down. There you go. Try it. If it's not loud enough, let Milo know.
Is this loud enough? Can everybody hear me? All right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to get this started right off. This is To Know and Know. I want to tell you a story while pretending there's nothing of me within it. I want to spill out my heart, but for a heart to spill, blood must spill too. But what else is there to come from the heart? You can't just walk around blood, You have to stand there. You have to stand there and say almost stunningly aloud that you think that's blood. I want to tell you the depths of my heart, but there's no such thing as being known without someone knowing in turn. I wish to splay out my mind like cards across a table and ask you to pick a thought, any thought. When you pick it up, I will have you shuffle the duck with it, and smiling a sly little smile, I will reach behind your ear and from nothing pluck it out, asking if it's yours, but, well, the problem of knowing, of being known. There's a thread as an author that one must balance upon, the thread of too much and not enough. This determines whether your writing is worth something. This determines whether your work is good. If you don't give enough, your work lacks passion, a voice. If you restrain yourself too tightly, a dog held to a tree by a leash, then you have stifled yourself more effectively than any critic ever will. If you restrain yourself too tightly, then the soul your piece is supposed to have will be thin and flickering and lifeless. On the opposite hand is giving too much. There are countless poems I've written that are so visceral they will never see the light of day past my own eyes. They are raw and unfiltered, and They are slabs of meat you find at the grocery store that leak through their plastic casing. They're too much. If you give too much of yourself away, then it becomes to you. That's always the problem. If you give too much of yourself away, run too raw, then at the end of the poem you'll have to look up and perhaps you'll see horror or boredom. Or you'll lock eyes with someone you know and they will see you in a new light, a light you are not privy to knowing, only that something has changed, that they know you. There's too much of me to give and not enough to make it palatable for you. I want to write something you've never heard before. I want to be able to sleep tonight. I'm not sure how to manage both of these at once. I want to let go of my heart, but the weight within it is too heavy to pass along without warning, too heavy to pass along without you pausing, staring at the blood, and asking how long I've been carrying it. I wish to spill out my guts without you knowing whose guts they are. When I pull them out behind your ear, I want you to pause and truly wonder whether they are your own, because where else could I have gotten them? So, let us pretend this is a mystery. I'll lay with the body and you stand above it and ask whose it is. And I will tell you the story behind every single finger, their hair, the way they stand, and then we will part ways, known without knowing, and knowing without being known.
You may want to move.
Yeah,
the
Milo,
mic
move it a little bit closer. Yeah.
Closer.
Yeah.
Is this any better?
Turn it so that it's.
A little closer to you, and this thing's adjustable too. It's an overly complicated microphone, to be honest with you. Yeah, there we go. That's probably better. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. This is something I wrote when I was missing a friend very clearly last summer. It is to split an orange. To split an orange is to say, I love you. Take this half of the sweet fruit, my friend. Let us bite into it together. Let us enjoy two halves of the same sweetness and tartness of both. Let our fingers become sticky with the same juice, and we will laugh as we brush them against our jeans, nearly synchronized in motion, only to find that this is a mess that will take more than cloth alone to clean. I want to share an orange with you. I want to split it down the middle, carefully weighing each half as to be fair. I want to pull it from my bag, grinning, and say, look at what I bought. I want it to be the single cool thing in the summer heat, a singular relief, and I want you to watch hungrily as I oh so carefully peel it. Will you laugh if I throw a piece of rind at you? Will you admire it if I hand you a section so perfectly curled that it would act as a spring? Here, have this half. It's perfectly balanced with mine, see? I promise it's right. I wish I could split an orange with you. You're too far away from me, and there's no one to blame for that, really. But I'm going to pretend it's your fault anyways. How dare you live hundreds of miles away? How dare you live there when I live here, with no easy bridge to close the gap between us? To split an orange is to say, I love you, but I suppose I just have to resort to the words themselves for now. A whole orange isn't enough to be filling, but that was never the end goal, really. I spent over a minute deciding on it, picking it over a dozen others that were too soft or too yellow. I enjoyed it. I did. I chose it just for us, after all. It was technically perfect. I just think this would taste a lot better if only you could eat it too.
Milo, let me make one more adjustment on your mic. Your stuff is so good. I don't know if this works. Let me raise this just a bit. I think that'll probably, it's like there's a fine line between it's where it needs to be and it's blocking your face. Yeah.
Too much and not enough.
Right.
And this is something that I wrote actually I want to say the night before I came to this very location the first time, and what got me right here. This is a poem about rubber gloves. For 18 years of my life, I didn't use rubber gloves to wash the dishes. I thought it would be a stupid purchase, you see. One of those where you buy it once and use it twice, and then you realize it was never going to help you to begin with. You just let it rot in its place in the drawer, and you mourn the $2 you spent, and you forget. You always forget. I feared that, you know. I hoped that they might help me, but mostly I just feared wasting the money. I feared the thought of getting my hooks up and approaching the gushing water, only for it to slip past the banded barrier, sinking down in between the sides and against my skin, making my fingertips prune and my already cold hands freeze. I feared that I would trade wet, shaking hands for slick rubber, squeaking and squishing as I flexed my fingers, soap building between my palms with nowhere to drain. Have you ever seen one of those wetsuits, the type divers use? No, I haven't either. I heard that it's the same concept, though. And yes, sorry, the gloves. I did buy them, eventually, against my better judgment, or maybe just against my worst fear. And for once, I can do the dishes and it doesn't hurt. For once, I don't feel like I'm crawling out of my mind as I touch water and food scraps and soaking wrappers that never belong to me. For once, I don't feel that like I am trapped in my skin and that I need to scream. And if I scream, then everyone will hear me and they will look at me and they will say, look, I can do the dishes just fine, so how about you take it easy? Take a breath, sit down. But I can't take it easy. I can't. I touch the water and I want to scream. I can't breathe. And the gloves fix that. For the most part, they help. This is to say, maybe you need a pair of rubber gloves. Would that be enough to let you handle me? Maybe then you could hold me. Maybe then you could pick me up and the touch of my skin wouldn't make you recoil. What do you think? Maybe it'll just be another one of those worthless purchases, and if so, I will let it go. I promise. I'll let those rubber gloves sit in the bottom drawer of this kitchen, and we can watch them deteriorate together, or you can watch them alone if you like. I'll sit out here on the couch and wait for you to come in and pronounce that they're dead. Would we mourn them together? Or would you just leave me there to deal with their corpses, paired even as they become nothing more than trash? Would you be in the other room while I stare down at their broken, cornstarched bodies? This is to say, if it turns out that they aren't worthless, useless junk, if they don't die and we don't kill them, then maybe just for a moment you could hold me. Maybe then you'd want to. Sorry. I'm spilling my guts, my blood all over your floor. I don't need to make such a mess. Can you hand me the... Yeah, those. No, just one should be enough for Dakota. Sorry. I'll clean this up. It'll just take me a minute. Okay. Sure. Yeah. No, you don't have to do that. Please don't bother to... Thank you. Do you want my help? I can do it. I can get on my hands and knees and scrub. I didn't ask you to clean this. I don't want to impose. Sorry. Thank you. I owe you one. You can throw those away there. Yeah, I'm fine. It'll stop in a second. Would you stay with me? Oh. Okay. I'll meet you in there. Thank you. Don't wait. You can start it. It's okay. I won't be long. Thank you. Sorry. I come back to the thought of rubber gloves. I think I understand what's upsetting you. You know, there was a time once when I didn't want to be held. It made me feel the way doing dishes did until finally someone did hold me. They held me properly like no one else could, and I can't remember their face anymore, but I can remember their arm around my shoulders, how I didn't twitch for over an hour until my back was stiff and I had to move. I was forced to, betrayed by my own body. When I did, my spine cracked so loudly that it could be heard across the room. At the sound of it, they grimaced, laughed, and moved away. I didn't want them to. I wish they'd never left. I don't blame them. Is it the same for you? Tell me, I will understand. Do you wish to keep away like I once did? Maybe the dishes don't want to be held either. Do you think the plates, cups, and bowls dread my attack? Before the rubber gloves, were we actually in a stalemate, a standoff, a mutually assured destruction? Were we 2 leaders off, fingers resting against triggers, knowing that neither would leave our encounter unscarred? To a dish is being washed as much torture as it was for me to wash it. They need to be washed, though. They need to be cleaned to avoid the food they once held, the food that they still cling to rotting, or else risk being nothing more than a vessel of festering sick. The cups may be clear, but they are no test tubes. Mold in a test tube is worth something, at least. But mold in a cup in a sink will just make us sick. Mold in a cup in a sink is worth nothing more than a strained breath. Mold in a cup in a sink will never inspire anything more than the desire to throw it out. Mold in a cup in a sink will spread and spread and spread until it's not mold in a cup in a sink, but it's mold in a bowl in a sink, and mold in a pipe under the sink, and mold in the walls of our house, and the paper. mold in the walls of our house, and mold in the lungs of my body. The dishes need to be washed, and I need to wash them. No matter what either of us think of it, I come back to the thought of rubber gloves. If I were to rot all over the place, my skin a bleeding ground for mold, my guts fertilizer for infection, would you take the time to rub salt from my eyes? Would you finally take my chin, my cheek, and tell me that it's all right? Would you hold me then? If I were dying fermenting, my veins a hydroponic system for strain away that will last long after us both, would you tell me that you loved me? Would you insinuate it? Don't look at me like that, sweetheart. Tell me if you'd wash me, if only to make sure I can still be used, if only to protect your floors. Please, I don't want to make you sick. You don't have to buy the gloves even. I can do that for you. It's only fair. I'll buy the finest pair ever to deign your hands. Designer, tailor-made. I'd pay off the Guinness World Records just to admire them, to plaster your name and photo into next year's gas station book. Maybe a father will buy a copy for his son to stare at during a long car ride, and he'll point out your fine, comfortable gloves, and then your name will be a household name. Would you like that? Or maybe I'll steal the cheap, flimsy ones from a doctor's office, so that when they disintegrate from disuse, there will be no great waste. I'll do it now. I can get the car keys. Just tell me if then you'd hold me. Could you do that? Could you stand it? Would you try? Could you finally bear holding me if we never touched? I could bear it. I'd bear it for you. Please. Hold me. Help me. I need someone to kill this rot. Thank you very much. And very much in theme with that last poem, this is something that I wrote last night. So, if it stinks, it doesn't leave this room, okay? We all forget about it. I believe I called this one The Moon and You. The moon splits the ceiling in two. Its splendor sickly and pallid, the walls dull enough that they could have been any color at all. You feel strange here, disconnected from the world, disconnected from time and space, and above you, the ceiling light looks like the moon. It looks like the moon, but it's not, but it is, and you feel like a stranger beneath this object. And it's fine, you're fine. You are exactly who you have always been, even here, even now, exposed to the strange liminal luminosity. Except, what if that's wrong? Except, you're always changing, and so are you actually who you claim to be at all? What if you've changed? Humans are always changing. What if this is you now? Wouldn't that be miserable? What is that, you ask, lifting your hand painstakingly to the sky, because that is no moon you know. You turn your head, and a million bedroom doors appear. Close the door, you tell them, but if they hear you, then they're clearly not listening. If they hear you, then they certainly don't care. If they hear you but don't react, do they really even hear you at all? The room is all walls. It's fake. It's fake and you hate it, and as the light dims, you feel like you dim too. Someone turn off that light, turn it off. Finally you twist, gasping and grasping for the switch, clinging onto yourself, hoping. The lever goes down with a click so soft it might as well have not sounded. Beside you is a friend. Sometimes, you tell him, it feels like I don't exist at all. But not in the way where I think I'm fake, it's just, do I even know myself? If I don't, does anybody? He clicks his tongue and barely glances up. Sounds hard, he says. Want to go play chess? The light turns off, the faint brightness fading over sides like it's aftershocks, like the sun has burnt into your eyes. The light turns off, but it's hard to tell. It fades so slowly that you're not sure if it's truly off, if it were on, if it's still going off. Please, you say to it, be out already. Please leave me alone. Okay, you tell him, because you really don't want to, but he does. He does, and you don't want to be alone. White or black? Dealer's choice, he tells you, and hands you the board. You stared down at it for a long, long while. Hasn't he heard you at all? Finally, the room is dark, and it could be anywhere at once. You could be anyone. Who are you again? Finally, you pull out a king and set it in place. The moon rising once again. I'll gauge by that we don't have to go throw it into the trash. I don't know how we're doing on time.
Neither do I, actually. I'd say you have another 5 to 10 to play.
Okay. How about I have 2 more short poems and then I'll leave it open. In this one, I don't remember the name of that all. Yes, I do. It's an inheritance of sorts. My heirloom is a yarn twisted between my hands, just like my mother taught me to when I was young. It's how I start the beginning of a hat, chain stitches creating a hole through which to close, just the way I had passed off to her when I was learning, my young hands too small to know the motions. Every blanket I made would have the same beginning, a frustrated breath, a plea, and hands older and wiser and larger than mine taking over, taking me to a place where I knew the steps by heart. She taught me just the way her mother did, and I don't remember her name, but I have a book aged yellow. Fragile beneath my fingers, every new stitch an X mark to show that she has already made it. Beside those X's in my mother's own writing, little glue crosses, the markers still strong after so many years. I pick up a pencil, my crochet hook balanced between my pinky finger and ring while I pause and add a third mark along this family gallery.
And you were your grandmother's works, right?
And finally, this is inspired by a poem, I believe by Andrew Kane, called To Be a Dog, and it is inversely called To Be a Cat. To be a cat, you must learn that some people will never understand you. To be a cat, you must learn that by valuing the moment of peace, you'll be seen as aloof. By not wanting to be at someone's beck and call, you'll be considered mean and cold. You must learn to talk in a language they understand, and you must learn how to purr louder, loud enough. And you must learn that the gesture you once did for your mother will make them flinch away and protest. You must learn to love them in a way they can understand. To be a cat is to learn by fire that if you're not redeemable, if you're seen as cold and aloof, and if you don't purr loud enough, if you don't trust hard enough, you must then lay outside. You will not be asked about this. You will be evicted with sharp words and pressing hands and the injustice of not having 24 hours to collect your things before you go. And to be outside is grand. There are mice and birds to eat and trees to climb and so many places to hide in. But to be outside is to be not inside. To be a cat is to learn how not to yearn for the brightly lit windows and warm laughter on cold nights. You must learn that you can either choose to be yourself or to be warm, and both choices can be good, and both choices can be bad, can be awful, can lead to misfortune if you're not lucky enough. To be a cat is to lay on a windowsill and hope that soon you'll be warm. To be a cat is to lay on a windowsill and hope that soon you'll be free. To be a cat is to jump off a windowsill and wind around legs and meow so loudly and to accept love that you've never known the other side of. To be a cat is to stare inwards at a crowd of them and wish that their hands would reach out and touch you. To be a cat is to have the fog of your breath obstruct their view. And to be a cat is to run away when they yell for you to do so. The only obedience they could ever earn.
I'd love to start off the discussion with questions from the audience. Comments, questions,
Yes, if there's
observations.
If not, that's completely fine.
Well, don't worry, if they don't, I will.
Did you ever read a poem by, I don't know if it was Andrew Marvell, one of the ancient British poets, I think it was Marvell, but he wrote a poem called My Cat Jeffrey. think I have to look it up, but your last poem definitely puts me in mind of that, the classic cat poem from.
I don't think I have read it.
I'll have to check on the author. I think it's Marvell, but it's a great poem to just kind of the repetition of my cat. Just kind of reminds me of
Thank you.
yeah, sounds good.
I like the cat. I definitely like the cat.
There's an obvious question. Do you have a cat?
Many.
Ah,
I have 5 cats, and my grandfather has many more.
okay. You have a great insight into where this could be a cat, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay. What strikes me about your writing, 2 things really, a lot of things actually, really strike me. But the one thing that strikes me when we talk about the cat is your use of metaphor. Every single piece tonight uses metaphor in a very pronounced way up front. But behind it, there's so much. You really are sort of like doing the thing we all want to do as writers, and that's using the metaphor to say something else. And you want to talk about that a little bit? How conscious you are of that in your work?
I don't know. I think that I work with that so often that it has become a second nature. I often interact with the world in such a way that I'm constantly thinking about how things could be used, both to be described in writing, and also how it can be used in another way. Sorry, that's not a great
That's
answer.
a good
It's
answer.
just
No,
second
that's-
nature.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for some people who have to learn how to think in metaphor. It's not always easy.
Yeah.
But there are other things that strike me about your work as well. And one of the other things is voice. And one of the greatest compliments I can pay to a writer too is your poem or your story, the narrative, the voice sounds as though it's a character in a play. And I was going to ask you if you wrote any drama, because you certainly, your narrators do sound completely like they are fleshed out characters, right?
Thank you. I wouldn't say I write drama, but I do write outside of this when I'm writing plain and simple fiction. I do write a lot of things with very high tension, which might influence the way that I think about even nameless characters, because I'm very used to like even pulling out just like even just pulling out like the just intrinsic dread of something very benign, like saying to somebody that you like them or something. So I definitely write that a lot. It's not quite drama.
Yeah, that tension, I think, comes through, that necessary kind of tension and suspense, even, right? Will this person connect? Do what you're saying, yeah, it's really there.
I think that's also influenced. Oh, sorry, did somebody have their hand raised?
So please, answer.
I think that also it's influenced a lot by how I experience the world, which is undue tension.
Yeah. Really.
I was wondering, I really appreciated your first poem. I believe it was the first one you talked about pulling yourself out of someone else, like behind scenes here and pretending and walking away. And I was curious as to when you're writing, do you consciously choose to start from your own perspective, or do you try to start from somebody else's perspective and write somebody else's story?
Usually I try and write my own story, and then I go back and I alter it so that it sounds like somebody else's. As to not so much, as the poem itself said, put too much of myself in there.
It just struck me too. I mean, so many things that were striking. The thing that also struck me was the degree to which
even though it's clear that you're talking from experience, you're writing from experience, emotional experience, your choice of subject and the way you go at it, the way you have this speaker speak, it makes it very easy to identify with your work. Because there's a kind of emotional wisdom in it, a kind of, I saw a lot of people nodding, like identifying with that thought, that idea, that feeling. And I think that's pretty remarkable.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
I really like your energy. You have a really eloquent voice. And when you were talking about, it was the knit or the glove one, about the gloves. When you said like sorry, I thought you were off script. Like I thought you just like messed up or something. But no, that was part of the act. I was very surprised. That was legit.
Thank you. I wrote that one pretty much while I was washing the dishes, and I had I was using my text to speech actually, because sometimes if I just move to like sit down and actually write something, I lose half the train of thought. So part of that probably was an actual dialogue at some point, but I also I quite like that poem actually for behind the scenes kind of having a very unhealthy relationship, and how I can try and communicate that through pauses and that sort of thing.
There's such a thing in I've been writing poetry since I was younger than you are now, and there's such a thing as finding your voice in poetry, and I think it happens for many people over quite a long period of time. But what I was struck by is that I think you already have a sense of your, I'm not talking about your voice, but your voice that comes through in the poems. And I think you already have some real sense of that, and that's unusual, I think.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I've been writing for a lot of my life, since I was like 13 or 14. A lot of it not very good. And I think part of that also has to come with the fact that behind the scenes, I have things that I'm not able to publish monetarily, but I've put on the internet. And between that, I've written about 2 or 3 novels, technically. Last year, I wrote 500,000 words. So it gives a little bit of experience. Thank you.
You achieve that thing that's the hardest to do, and that's to get inside a narrator's or a character's, a voice's head. To get inside, even if it's you, it's a version of you, or it's not you. How do you inhabit that person at that moment and write it as you're inhabiting it? It's not an easy thing to do. It's probably the most difficult thing to do, and you do it really well.
Thank you.
Now, speaking of publishing and writing, 500,000 words is very impressive. An average novel is about 90,000 words.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm just wondering about publishing. Every writer, there are a number of writers in the audience. You think about publishing all the time. And I'm curious, as someone as young as you and relatively new to it, how do you approach trying to get your work out there?
So far, I'm mostly approaching it with resources that have like an entire list of different magazines and such to try and put poetry out there, because it feels like if I have something published, it gives me a bit of a step up when I want to publish something like an actual book, which is even harder than I imagined, even though I knew it would be.
But not impossible, I promise. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand when they're starting out is that there are barriers in that people's tastes are different, editors' tastes are different, but it doesn't cost a lot to send out work these days. It used to cost more.
Really?
When I was 20 years old, it was paper and self-addressed stamped envelopes, and you had to have like a typewriter or printer and do the whole bit. Now it's usually a click, at most, maybe it's a couple dollars.
Yeah.
To submit to a certain journal.
I think in total I've spent $9. Yeah, I think definitely a mistake I also made when I was first starting out was I didn't have enough short things that I wanted to publish, which I've also spent the last year trying to build that portfolio of it. But I would just send off like one thing at a time, which definitely meant that the publishers would see one thing of mine and would go, well, this wasn't quite what we wanted from you. Which I think probably gave me a leg down almost.
There are theories of that, right? So usually they say, poems, for example, 3 to 5 poems, 3 to 6 poems, whatever. And one theory would say, well, give them a variety, maybe they'll like something. And the other theory is, I'm only going to send them one, because they never get one. So they're going to look at this and say, wow, he must be really confident in this one thing.
Yeah.
So I guess it could go either way. I'm not sure. I've never had the guts to be the one, like send the one. Here you go. Here's one.
Yeah. I when I first started out, I was like, oh, you know what? It gives them less to read through if they don't like my stuff. And now I've got enough, and I'm also like, that probably like does not help. You get through all these waiting queues, and they get like one poem, and they're done.
To say, I mean, there are probably, I don't know if there are people in the room who have done it, but I've been an editor of a literary magazine. You get a ton of submissions. Even the smallest ones just get a ton. You're talking about a high acceptance rate is like 5%.
Right.
The best ones, the most prestigious ones, are probably 4%. Think about that in numbers. It's like, So don't get discouraged if one editor didn't like your work, or there's always somebody who does.
I think the best compliment I've gotten is from an editor who turned it down, but was like, I liked what you did with the style of this. Keep up that voice. It's like,
if you get a response like that, even with a rejection, that should be very encouraging.
thank you. Is there any other questions, comments?
I will say, I agree with the comment made about your voice. It's strong already, so yeah, encourage you to maintain it. I do want to say, yeah, I sit here corrected about the comment I made about the cat poem. It wasn't Andrew Marvell, it was Christopher Smart, 17th century. And his poem about the cat, it was fun to read. I'll just read how it starts. For I will consider my cat Jeffrey, for he is a servant of the living God. And I just lost it. But it goes on and on. It's just it's a fabulous list of repetitive elements about to my cat Jeffrey's so wondered.
I'll have to look that up.
Can I? I'm going to go up there and
Yes.
ask you as I come up one more thing. You live in Italy Valley, so it's probably pretty quiet most of the time.
Yes.
I think there are some people who like a lot of stimulation in order to write, and there are a lot of people who like complete isolation, quiet. Do you have a preference, or you're born here and this is what you got, so this is what you do?
I'm both. If it's stimulation in like other people being around and car sounds and all that, it irritates me. However, I do need to have like amped up rock music or something just to keep my brain entertained.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
So you're writing with music in the background?
Yes, all the time.
That's pretty, that's not unheard of, but it's unusual. Not everybody does that. Yeah, that's, wow.
At one point last year, I actually like I probably listened to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon like upwards of 20 times because I got really stuck in how I liked writing with that one.
Wow.
So you're not pulled away by the imagery sometimes or the references, it doesn't take you off the track.
I completely tune out the lyrics, including the alarm clock sounds. I just hear it in the background, and that's enough to keep my brain entertained while I am thinking up other things.
Wow, okay, so we know that like melody rewires the brain when you hear it
Yeah,
too.
sometimes I prefer ambient music, just without that, highs and lows and.
The musician is shaking her head.
No, I can't even have music on, like, in a restaurant, because I tune in on the music. It's, yeah,
I agree with you. I don't
it
like music
sucks me
playing.
right in, and I just can't do anything else.
It's one of the mistakes. If anybody opens a restaurant, please don't blast the music.
Yeah.
Good to know, good to know. All right,
Thank you, Milo.
thank you.
Terrific work. Yeah. We'll take take five, so everybody can go to the bathroom, get a drink if you like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And I don't know where the sign-up sheet is now. Here, it's floating, if anybody needs it, there it is.